thanks for the invitation, for being here and talking to all of you today. The title, I love this title, by the way, but it was Anna's idea. So all the credit goes to her, by the way. But yeah, I love this. She knows, she has heard the story about the stuff that we've been doing regarding iron nutrition. So it's going to be what I'm going to be talking about today mostly. Before I move on, and probably tying this with what Anna was explaining about agriculture and production, uh, I want to remind everybody, and maybe some of you are not in North Dakota and attending this seminar, and you are not aware of this, but North Dakota is by far the largest producer of dry beans in the US. That's why we promote beans a lot, right? It's part of our industry. It's important. It brings about 500 million per year to the North Dakota economy. Look at that, 42%, right? And then you take our neighbor state, Minnesota, and they do another 19%. So, I mean, you can pretty much say that this region, we call it the mean DAC region, right? Minnesota, North Dakota. The mean DAC region produces about 60% of the total U.S. production. I mean, this is the dry bean capital, right, of the U.S. So I just want to highlight that because you will be surprised how many times I say this, even to locals, and they're like, "Oh, I didn't know that," right? So it's really great. The other thing I want to say is, why do you have a breeder talking to you today? And I want to remind everybody that, you know, I really like this connection that we're trying to do between farm to fork because in the case of breeders, think about us as being really at the very beginning of the value chain. And a lot of people tells me, oh, so your main customer is the farmer. And I tell them, no. I mean, I have too many customers because I have to think not just about the farmer, but also I have to think about the the industry person, the packer, the canner, all the way down to that final consumer, right? So yes, my growers are my first consumer, my first customer, but not my only one, right? Because if I don't have a variety that is going to be liked by all these other actors of the value chain, then my job is not going to mean anything, right? So it's pretty cool. It's very impactful, but at the same time, it's very challenging because of that, right? Trying to please too many people with too many requests at the same time. Okay, so everything I'm going to tell you right now about this work that we're doing in iron nutrition, it's of course a team effort, and all the people. I want to give credit to all the people that you see in that picture there. It's a multi-person effort. I'm not the only one doing this. As a matter of fact, Raymond Glenn on your left side, he was the one that actually was probably the first person coming to me and saying, "Hey, I want to test some of your new beans because I have a hunch about them, right? Regarding iron." He's been studying iron nutrition for many years, right? I'm just a dumb breeder that just got caught into all this, and it's been a really, really interesting journey. But yeah, we have people from USDA, University of Nebraska, even people in Africa, University of Zambia, collaborating with all this work. Same as Jason and Ray, they work together in the same lab. So yeah, they've been really, really critical for all this work that we've been doing. Okay, all right. So which beans on that picture would you buy and eat? And we have 30 seconds to go and kind of say this and kind of answer this question. And the reason why I'm asking this, think about when you go to a supermarket and you're going to buy the beans that people were asking. By the way, people were asking how long you can store dry beans. I say usually about a year or two, depending on the conditions. After that, the beans usually lose so much moisture that they become really hard it takes longer to cook. The longer the beans have been stored, the longer they will take to cook normally. So I would say, in my case, I usually don't use beans that have been sitting on my storage for more than 1 or 1.5 years, right? Okay, so let's see, Scotty, we got some. Oh, look at that. Okay, so everybody says the majority of people say eater, right? I don't care. They seem fine to me, right? But then another second largest group say, well, I like the ones on the left, and then very few say they like the ones on the right. This is not what we normally get. I was thinking that this could happen, right? When we have done this before with sensory panels and review panels, they tend to pick the beans on the right. Why? Because they tend to think that those beans look fresher and they look, yeah, they look just like they were harvested sooner versus, what happens when you store beans for too long is that they start becoming darker, as you see there, right, in that picture. So this is something that we know as seed darkening or browning, right? And it happens in certain market classes of beans. So, for example, it's very common to see that issue with pintos, with cranberries, with pinks, with light red kidneys. You probably won't have that issue with a black bean, right? Because, or maybe it happens, but you don't see it in the same way, right? Other legumes, other crops, as Julie was saying, soybeans, faba beans, they also are prone to darkening. We have issues with fruits and vegetables, right? Grapes, apples. Every time you eat an apple and you leave it sitting on the table for a little bit, then it starts getting brownish, right? The potatoes, the bananas, the avocados, etc., etc. There is a perception out there among consumers that, yeah, darker beans tend to be old and therefore they're going to take longer to cook. Uh, Same for the grower. A farmer is thinking, well, these dark beans are probably going to have poor germination and lack of vigor. And when I harvest these beans, uh, if they are too dark, I'm going to get a discounted price at the elevator when I'm delivering those beans. So the farmer is really concerned about that because he may lose money if he brings beans that are too bad, right? Uh, Several things or several factors are causing that seed darkening. Of course, environment. So keeping your beans in the right storage conditions is important, but also sometimes our farmers cannot get to the bean field sometime because of rain or some other issues, and those beans start getting dark right in the field. So you can have fresh beans that just happen to be dark because they were harvested late, right? So you have storage issues and you have harvest issues at the same time, sometimes affecting our beans. So why is that? There is a group of compounds in the seed in plants. This is just in plants, known as flavonoids, right? And flavonoids are just a group of secondary metabolites that the plant uses for mostly defense mechanisms against pathogens or insects or UV light in many cases. And what we have found is that depending on the market class that we're talking about, right, if it's a white or a yellow or a pinto or a cran, you're going to have different profile content or different types of flavonoids, right? They're all kind of similar, but at the same time, they are different chemically speaking, right? So there's a unique profile for each one of them that makes them unique in the type of the flavonoids and the content that you have there, right? And what then we started seeing is that certain types of beans tend to have one type of flavonoids, the other ones have others. And this actually has repercussions on the amount of darkening that you see among those beans, right? Uh, but look at that. There is about 5,000 flavonoids discovered as of today, and there's probably more out there, right? But we have seen that really one of the culprits or the main things that are happening, it's all this group that we know as the proanthocyanidin group is the one that is really causing this darkening. It's just an oxidative process that happens, right, into the plants there. So bean breeders kind of started looking at this. I mean, can we have a bean that doesn't get dark over time, or at least can we delay that process a little bit so everybody in the value chain is not so rushed to move those beans through the system and get them to the consumer as fast as possible before they get dark, right? So, is there anything we can do? And there was a group, looking mostly at these are people who work at seed germplasm banks, right? And they were noticing, how come we have these beans that had been stored here for years and they still look like they were harvested yesterday, right? So scientists started looking at these. We have found two genes, one on chromosome 7 and the other one is on chromosome 11, if I remember well, the J. It's a non-darkening and a slow darkening gene. Uh, I've been mostly doing work with the slow darkening. We're going to just call it the SD. But I have another group in Canada, in Guelph, who does a lot of work with the non-darkening gene. I can tell you later why I prefer the slow darkening over the non-darkening. The other important thing I want to say before everybody starts, I know some people are concerned about GMOs. I'm not. I'm not against them, but this is a naturally occurring gene. It was found on beans. All we're doing is transferring that just to be a regular crosses and things like that. Okay, it's a loss of function. It means that it's a functioning gene, and then you have a mutation, and that gene doesn't work anymore. And it's related to all these. I'm not expecting you're gonna memorize this, but this is the metabolic pathway to produce this group of proanthocyanidins, right? So there is something that happens that this gene is disrupted, and we think it's either here or here, right? And after that, because this gene is not functioning properly, none of these things happen. So your beans, your slow darkening beans, are not producing these compounds that are going to lead to the darkening process, right? We're not the only ones. As I told you, there are issues everywhere with darkening. Apples is one of them. Potatoes, we have heard about bruising and browning in potatoes, right? So there are two new products out there for those of you who are not aware of this. There is something called Arctic apples. They don't oxidize, right? They don't get brown. And there is also something known as the innate potato that also is resistant to bruising and browning, right? I have to disclose that these are GMO products. Again, not against GMOs personally, but I know for some people this is important, so I just get the disclosure there. Uh, so yeah, there is a lot of cases in the food industry in which people are really, really trying to solve this issue, right? So again, let's go back to beans and talk about more about this. Not only that, these phytochemicals also have roles in human health, right? So you have heard a lot of times people say, well, you have to eat flavonoids, you have to eat antioxidants because they are good for you. And for the most part, this is true. It looks like we're getting some positive aspects uh, from many of these molecules that we call the flavonoids, right, or the phytochemicals. And there are different types. Uh, Also, they are responsible for this beautiful palette of colors that we see on beans. I mean, beans have taken me all around the world, and it's amazing to see all the different types and colors and shapes and sizes that people eat around the world. I mean, we only have a handful of those, but it's amazing what you get around, right? And it's all because of again these compounds, right? So they're not only to make beans look good, I mean, color, but also they have a lot of antioxidant, prebiotic, and interesting things to do. But they also, in some cases, can be inhibitors or promoters of certain nutritional factors, right? So there are some of those that are probably working against us, and some others that are working with us and then causing benefits. So again, we have to be careful when we say we should eat more antioxidants because it depends, right? As always in science, there is no yes and no answer as you would like to see, right? So that's the case, for example, for iron. What happens is we're finding that some of these molecules uh, actually will go and attach or chelate your iron molecule and not make that iron available for you to eat or to be absorbed by your intestine, right? Uh, Today we have a new sub-market class of pintos known as slow darkening pintos. You probably as a consumer don't hear much about them, but if you're a farmer or if you're working in an elevator or things like that, you probably have heard this before. It's been a new subclass that has been around 8 years in our markets. Initially, we had a lot of mixed reactions, as happens with any other technology, right? That's pretty normal. But even today, we estimate that about 35 to 40% of the total Pinto acreage in North Dakota, it's grown with slow darkening Pinto. So I mean, and it keeps growing, as we see. Same deal in Canada. They have several varieties already commercially deployed. If you go to Mexico, the number one variety is called Pinto Saltillo, and guess what? It's a slow darkening Pinto, and that's what they want. That's what they like, right? Brazil has already 4 varieties of their local market class, which is known as a carioca. You can see a picture here of how carioca beans look like. If you never try feijoada, talking about international dishes here, that's something that you should really, really try. We're now commercially dealing with a second generation of slow darkening pintos that have much more competitive agronomic performance and better quality and things like that. So, in breeding, things happen in small steps and baby steps, right? So just wanted to mention that. But then again, it was Raymond Glan. He's at USDA, but he works at Cornell University in Ithaca. And he's been working, his career has been on iron nutrition. And he wanted to see, okay, I want to test your slow darkening pintos for iron content and absorption because I have a hunch that they might be better. So he measures again how much iron we have in that seed, but also he wants to measure how much of that iron is in the right molecular form so you can so your intestine, your stomach, can absorb that iron and make it usable, right? So he uses a really interesting bioassay known as the KCO2 cells. I don't have time to probably get into much details about that, but those are actually live cells that came from a colon cancer patient, right? And it's an amazing story. I can probably tell you more about it if you're interested. But yeah, that's the way that you do in order to measure ferrite information. And ferrite information is a way to measure how much of that iron was really available for your stomach, for your intestine cells, that epithelial cells, to absorb it, right? Why we care about that? Iron deficiency is a big deal worldwide. Anemia and iron deficiency is the number one non-infectious disease on the way. It's the most common non-infectious disease worldwide, right? It affects 1.6 billion people. Your hemoglobin needs iron, right? This is known as the hidden hunger in developing countries, right? It's not an infectious disease, but it's a physiological disease. Even in the US, there is a 2 to 20% incidence, highly present in obese patients. This is not because you're not getting enough iron, but because the inflammation factors lead to having less iron absorption as well. So it's a big issue, right? So it's not just about how you increase iron, but also how you increase iron absorption, or in other terms, bioavailability, right? And again, I don't have to preach the converted. I know many of you are aware of this. Below here is a map showing the red and orange areas are those that are more prone to deaths related to iron deficiency. And of course, the African continent is the number one. Here in the Western hemisphere, you have Suriname and Guyana, Guatemala, it's one of the worst. Haiti as well. So it's an issue for us. And even in North America, we're not exempt from that issue, right? And there is plenty of evidence showing what happens when you don't have enough iron intake, especially as a child, right? As a kid. So here it is. We went ahead and measured regular pintos and slow darkening pintos, right? So let's focus on the graph on the left first. This is iron concentration, right? And then you have two varieties of regular pintos, and then you have two varieties of slow darkening pintos. As you can see, there is no major difference. They seem to have similar amounts of iron concentration, right? But then he goes ahead and do the second test, which is on the right side here, where he's measuring with the KCO2 bioassay how much of that iron is actually going to be bioavailable for your stomach to be able to absorb it. And look at what happens. Voila. Those slow darkening pintos now have between 4 to 7 times more bioavailable iron to be absorbed by your gut. Huge deal, right? Now we're talking about something. And again, we have all the data that shows that this is related to these flavonoids, and the presence and absence of certain things made this iron more available because there is less molecules that are chelating that iron molecule, and that iron is available to be used, right? Rather than going through your fecal matter and being eliminated. So that was really, really, really interesting, right? What we're doing right now with the Cornell group is, so we proved that, and now we're doing a poultry feeding experiment, trying to validate many of the things that I was just telling you that we found with the KCO2 cells. And then after that would be clinical trials, which are extremely expensive, right? but hopefully we can get to that point. Maybe we're gonna need to get people from the National Institute of Health to work on this, right? Yeah, I was talking with a USDA panel the other day, telling them you need to do better ties with NIH because NIH works a lot on curing diseases, but not much on preventing diseases. There is a lot of things that we can do to prevent diseases rather than try to cure diseases, right? And you know, the way we eat is one of them. Another kind of surprise point, right, or a breeding accident that we have. We found out that these slow darkening pintos cook faster. So here is having soaked beans. You have your regular darkening pintos take about 34 minutes to cook, while your slow darkening take 26 minutes. When I got these results, I was like, yeah, that's cool. I mean, 8 minutes different. I mean, that's not a big deal. And then the other people that work with me saying, no, this is a big deal. This, I mean, imagine saving 8 minutes on a canning operation, on a commercial kitchen, right? There are many things that you can do regarding those 8 minutes, savings in time, energy, and stuff like that. I even, when we started getting this slow darkening pintos into the market, I got people from commercial kitchens calling and saying, your beans are getting mushy, right? It's like, well, all you have to do is just, take them out of the stove earlier. You have an opportunity to make savings in your operation, right? So yeah, it was really, really interesting to see that. We also look at unsoaked beans. What happens if you don't soak the beans and you just go ahead and try them right away? Same deal. We found that, regular darkening pintos take about 100 minutes to cook, while you get cooked slow darkening pintos in 20 minutes less, right? Uh, I took this picture when I was in one of my trips in Rwanda, right? And these girls that you see here, they're gathering wood so they can cook at home. So, my first thought is, this girl should be at school. This was like at 11 a.m. in the morning when I took this picture. My first thought is this girl needs to be at school. They don't need to be gathering wood and so they can cook at home. Uh, so imagine the positive environmental effects of these things regarding energy, deforestation, labor, air quality, etc., etc. Right? So it's very rare for me to be able to develop a variety that checks so many boxes at the same time, right? The main challenge as a breeder is trying to blend all the good attributes that people want, both growers and industry and consumers, into a variety. So this is one of those few things in which I can probably say we were able to blend a lot of good things into one variety, right? It will never be perfect, but I think it was really, really interesting. So for me, I'm always thinking this brings a lot of interesting market opportunities. What if we can start selling high bioavailable iron beans or varieties, right? And start labeling things like that, right? The higher nutritional value, the faster cooking stuff, right? Pinto beans are also consumed in other countries. I mean, obviously Mexico, but also the Dominican Republic. Colombia is starting to see some increase on consumption of pintos. I have seen pintos in Tanzania and South Africa. So start thinking about the bigger picture here, right? And all the opportunities that these might bring, not just from the nutritional standpoint, but also from the industry side of things that can happen there. And we're actually working on transferring the same trade into other market classes that are prone to the same issue, right? So I was in my winter nursery in Puerto Rico about a month ago, and I was looking at some of the things that we're doing trying to move that trade into pinks, for example. And as you can see, it looks like we're starting to get there, right? So maybe in a few years, I'll be able to come and tell you, hey, we got a new slow darkening pink or a new slow darkening light red kidney or whatever, right? It's going to be interesting. And
So,
again, I want you to be aware that there is a lot of variation for bioavailability among these market classes. So that graph is showing you different market classes and how they vary for it when it comes down to that bioavailability that we're talking about, right? And as you can see, there is a group of beans known as manteca beans. I don't know how many of you have seen it. It's a yellow bean. But within yellow beans, we have actually two subclasses. So here's the mayocobas, which is probably the most common here in the US. But we also have in Africa and Central America, we have something known as manteca. And those are the champions, right? And then we have non-darkening cranberries. And look at what happened here. Our slow darkening pintos are also winning the race really well. Sorry, I know many people like black beans, but when it comes to iron nutrition, they're probably not your best option. It always puzzles my mind because our major issues with iron deficiency happens in Guatemala and Haiti in the Western Hemisphere. Guess what they eat? Black beans. Okay, so again, I don't have any proof, but it's just an interesting coincidence that happens there, right? Three more. Also, white beans. People think that white beans could be a good option for you, and they are, but not as good as what we're showing you with the slow darks and things like that. Look at ground beef, which we know it's a good source of iron. Our slow darkening pinto beans are getting there, along with the ground beef in terms of iron availability, right? So these are the things that hopefully you were able to learn today. Iron is important. Beans are good for iron. Slow darkenings and no darkening beans are great for that, but also at other classes as well. If you want to read more about slow darkening pintos, Chelsea Didinger from A Legume a Day has a really nice story on her website, so that's going to be there. And that's all I have to say. Sorry, I went a little bit over.